Welcome to another episode of the Tobago House of Assembly's Post-Executive Council Media Briefing. This week, the Secretary of Health, Wellness and Family Development, Dr. Agatha Carrington, and the Chief Secretary, Kelvin Charles, address the media.
We are here this afternoon, the Secretary of Health, Wellness and Family Development, and your humble servant, because we are prepared to address the situation that took place at the new head office of the Division of Health, Wellness and Family Development. Quite clearly, it was a disturbing situation, which ought not to have happened and which I hope would not happen again, because it demonstrates a particular kind of lawlessness, akin almost to mob rule, which is something that in the context of the development of the island, one cannot tolerate. In fact, a review of the footage would suggest beyond a shadow of a doubt that the actions need to be condemned. Because if there is the view that something is not right, then clearly there must be a better way to resolve issues of that nature. And indeed, one has to ask the question, was it an industrial relations situation or was it a political event? Because if it were the former, one may be able to account for the presence of Mr. Watson Duke as president of the PSA. But then how does one account for the presence and actions of the two persons who are members of a political party that are now in opposition? And if it were a political event, what then was the legitimacy for the three people to be there in relation to the issues that were raised? Because that's a work site. I wish to place on record, as I said, my condemnation of the activities. As a matter of fact, at one time, some of the workers, accompanied by some of the persons that I would have just mentioned, because I don't know if to say union representatives or politicians, went upstairs and was pounding on the door of the Honorable Secretary. That was akin to thuggery. Cannot be countenanced at all. It has to be condemned. What was also unfortunate, as you will hear from the secretary, is that she was in a meeting with persons from the disabled community. And my information is that they became traumatized. As a matter of fact, one lady, female, right? Yeah, had left the room and was in the middle of the commotion. And the person was frightened for her life. That is the kind of society we are hoping to build in Tobago. In this year of our Lord 2017. If in fact one felt that there were legitimate OSH issues, there is a process delineated by law. Now let me place on record that as politicians, we would have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution and the law. And among other things, to do right by all men. I ask the question, if the minority leader, and I'm using minority leader, as one who would have taken a similar oath, Was his behavior consistent with the law that he has sworn to uphold? Was his behavior and his utterances akin to doing right by all men, including the Honorable Secretary? And what Tobago needs to face up to is that this gentleman wants to lead this island. That's part of his ambition. If you cannot be expected to uphold the law, what happens? What happens? What happens? I do have a copy of the OSH document that relates to refusal to work, and I shall just read briefly from it. We would be prepared to make copies available, particularly by soft copy, to members of the media. And I'm going to try to be balanced in this brief presentation. Every worker has the right to refuse to do unsafe work. Unsafe work. There are some exceptions to that, and that includes the Defense Force, police services, persons employed in a lab, etc. There's a subsection that says sufficient reason. Reasons for refusal to work must be sound and based on verifiable information. A worker refusing to work must be in a position to produce evidence to support a claim of a threat or of serious or imminent danger. And this is section 15. Serious and imminent danger implies that there is a high probability that an accident resulting in a critical or fatal injury will occur in the workplace as a result of exposure to an occupational safety or health hazard. And serious physical harm or critical injury means that a part of the body is damaged so severely that it cannot be used or cannot be used very well. And of course, the Act also prescribes the process for the laying of the complaint and the investigation of the complaint. And I'll just briefly touch. Now, assuming there is no Safety and Health Committee, the worker shall report his refusal to work to the employer or his representative and the OSHA chief inspector. And the worker's refusal will be investigated in accordance with Section 18 of the Act, so that there is a clear procedure to be followed. And I'm not going to go into all the steps. As I said, I shall make the document available to you. We issued a press release yesterday evening because we know the mischief that was made. I do hope you all would have received a copy of it. But I just take this opportunity to quote from the release. And the Secretary shall elaborate in a while. She'll provide some of the context and the history to this. It was not an overnight thing. The decision to relocate the division was based on the following reasons. Cost effectiveness. As members of the media, you are acutely aware of the fact that we were renting 2 buildings for our head office. The intention was to move from one into the other. And of course, we were incurring liabilities. And in circumstances where we had to husband our resources, clearly it would be an untenable situation to continue with this ad infinitum. It was something this administration inherited, and we decided to move as quickly as we could to treat with that situation. Another reason had to do with improving the office accommodation for staff. And again, the secretary would elaborate on that, because you may be interested to know the conditions under which some of the workers were working in the present building. You may be surprised. And third, of course, to improve the efficiency of the operations. Because to the extent that you have all or the majority of your departments in one central place, to that extent you are able to operate in a one-stop shop kind of environment, thereby allowing your clients, particularly your external clients, to access your services. Because I have received several complaints from persons of the public indicating the challenge that they were having in accessing services dispensed by the Division of Health, Wellness, and Family Development. What needs to be said very forcefully is that the allocation of space was not done in a haphazard manner, but rather it was done according to OSH standards. The issue, I understand, of the possible non-payment of salaries was also raised. May I advise that strict instructions were given to ensure that all salaries due to workers would be paid. As a matter of fact, last week, Wednesday, the chief administrator, at his meeting with all administrators, gave the instruction. Last week, Wednesday as well, at the Executive Council meeting, I advised all administrators to instruct their secretaries for them to take all appropriate steps to ensure that payments of salaries would be done on time.
As Secretary for Health, Wellness and Family Development, my understanding is that my call to serve is a higher order activity, and which I have assumed with the seriousness it deserves. A call for representation of the staff is also a higher order activity, one that should not be abused. And therefore, the situation and circumstance that we experienced yesterday, I will want to engage not just the media, but the entire community, because this is a circumstance and a situation that is intolerable, one that is untenable and should not occur in workspaces. When I assumed duty in January of this year, my first interaction was to meet with the administrator and walk into her office. I walked through a room where the Human Resources Department was located, gaping holes in the ceiling, a bucket in the center of the room, caution tape around it, and newspaper to absorb all the water that was pouring into the building. That for me was unacceptable. I inquired, why is it so? And it took quite a lot of effort to have this situation remedied. When I looked throughout the other areas, we had situations where staff complained about the mold in the building, and indeed, efforts were made to remedy that situation. Men dressed in spacesuits during the dark of night to treat the mold in the building. staff having to work shorter hours because the same staff association, the Public Services Association, indicated that the building was unsuitable for work and therefore the workers should not be allowed to work there. And so that resulted in shorter hours or adjusted hours of work and in fact an impact on productivity in that division, in our division. I don't know which country, which workspace will continue in an environment where it is unsafe. May I say as well, the administrator of our division removed herself from the same workspace because it was unsafe for her, leaving, without advice to the secretary, leaving the secretary and the other staff to work in the same space. I work in an office where the water coming from my face basin is green. I work in a place where the cesspit tank has not been sealed and odor escapes there. It was sealed recently. The entire compound is one in which it is unsatisfactory to have work continue. I also inherited an arrangement as approved by the Executive Council in 2016 of August, where Happy Building was rented to relocate the staff and to ensure that the staff work in more improved accommodation such that we can improve productivity. We have had to meet the expenses for both locations for more than a year. In August of this year, the Executive Council was approached again because the building as rented was not outfitted and therefore you could not occupy it. And that the Executive Council approved the retrofitting of the building so that the staff could occupy the building. While that was in progress, discussions were held, the administrator was communicated to and with in terms of planning, and therefore we had planning occurring from since August to date. It is in month 5, the voice and data remains outstanding. We had the petition put in less than a month, and therefore it meant we had to, and also the workstations were in as part of the arrangement because we wanted to do it quickly. We understand the challenges our staff face, and therefore this had to be addressed with haste. May I say the inefficiencies in our division abound. There are many, many circumstances in which we cannot meet our payments to our staff on time because of the shorter hours of work. We have had this situation for far too long, and therefore the effort has been to reduce the challenges faced by our internal and external publics so that they too can have some ease in terms of doing transactions with us. We have many, many circumstances in which our clients are awaiting services from our division, and they are not delivered for various reasons. One may say it is because of the shorter hours. And so we need to address, one, the shorter hours, two, the work ethic of the staff, the attitude with which they proceed with work, and all of these matters because we gave the commitment, and indeed my own commitment is one to service. I would want to encourage the staff to understand why we have had to do this, because it is claimed that they were not made aware. But there are several pieces of communication to the persons who are to discharge a responsibility, and that appeared not to have been done. And so, firstly, we met a situation that was untenable. We've dealt with it in terms of effecting the occupation of the building, ensuring that the appropriate plans were put in place. And may I say that the discussion and the agreements included notification to the existing landlord, the property owner, Independent Properties Limited, that we will vacate the building by December 15th. That was given way in advance. So too are other contractors. We did that because we wanted to be certain that we follow the procedure and we do it logically. May I say as well that we expected that as at November, the Department of Social Welfare and Social Services should have been vacated since then, based on the plans we had. And the fact that things occurred the way they did was not because the secretary erred in any way. I ensured in my meetings that we discussed and agreed in terms of the approach. The new issues now arising about suitability of the space and how small the building is could not be justified. Because if you walk through the existing building, you would see bundles of paper at people's feet. You would be able to really, we will want to understand why would somebody want to work in a setting like that, where there's mold that's affecting your health, where many of them have had to submit claims to their insurance companies because of what they faced. And our effort has been to improve that situation so that they could work in a healthier environment. This is an opportunity for our staff to work in improved settings. It's an opportunity to look at the way they work. Because I want to invite the media to walk down the corridor. There's a room called the training room. Government records are just thrown just anyhow. No understanding of the importance of the management of these records. There is no way you can store those in your workspaces, and therefore on-site, off-site storage must be explored. Such storage must be such that we can retrieve the documents as and when required. I have had the privilege to serve as the first administrator of this division, and therefore the processes are very, very clear to me, having spent a large part of my career in the public service. And therefore the way we do work ought not to continue. It ought not to continue with the inefficient way. We have situations where our staff have had to wait long months, many months, to be re-engaged, all because of the low level of productivity that we now experience. That is unacceptable as well. We expect that our staff, in the discharge of their duties, as I am doing in the discharge of mine, will understand that if you are engaged to work, that's what you do. If I am employed with the division and my leave ends, I proceed on my post-contract leave and that's the end of it, I should be able to return to work. This is not the approach at present, because we do not work the hours we are expected to work. Main problem being the conditions in which they work. That is a claim made. And therefore we have to look at all of those. The situation occurring yesterday, my division is one that deals with health, wellness, and family development. And therefore, the community of differently abled persons are our stakeholders. And we hosted a planning meeting yesterday. And while that meeting was in session, we experienced a situation that ought not to be experienced by any human being, let alone a person who is differently abled, because they experience the trauma perhaps even more than those who are able-bodied. One member of the community had gone to the bathroom, and on return, she was faced with that and had to be consoled and pacified because she couldn't understand what was happening around. And this trauma that our disabled community faced is unacceptable and ought to be condemned as well, because they came to a building to discuss how we could integrate our services, how we could serve them better. They did not come to be subject to this level of abuse. And therefore, that is a situation too that this community must know of, that this island must know of, and this country must know of. because representation is not about abuse. Representation is not about exploitation of the staff. It's not about helping a person to stay in office. It's not about mounting a political campaign. And therefore, we are here to serve, and serve we will. And we are encouraging others to do so. However, we will not accept this behavior in our workspaces. Let me just say as well, for those persons whose business is not in our workspaces, we encourage them to desist from coming there, because the participation of the minority councillor and the representative for Palatuve, Kastara and Lands for Me is really out of order. It is our expectation that they will pay attention to their representation, because my understanding is that is a political role. But when you try to infuse your political role in our work environment, it creates a different dilemma. I wish to say as well that for the trauma that I faced yesterday, there are legal options that I will explore, because this will not go unattended. Let me just say as well that whether the employees stay in one building or the other, there's no commitment for us to continue paying in both buildings, for both buildings. We are in a financial situation. We are in a building that is unsafe, and we will not subject the staff to that arrangement. I am told that they have been asked to sign the register and leave. If they do so on their own free will, because you need to be at work. Let me just say as well, if there are issues that the staff representatives want to address, that could be done in a civil manner. But the hostility displayed in our building will not be tolerated. We have had to call in the police to ensure that we remain safe. And if that is the environment in which persons who are pursuing political office and political leadership, if that is the way they want to proceed with it, I shudder to think what is going to happen. I, for my own part, will continue, committed as I have started, ensuring that I carry out the mandate that I've been charged to carry out, fearlessly so. I do not intend to be intimidated by staff associations in the conduct of legitimate work. I am seeking and working on behalf of every employee such that their needs will be met and such that we can serve our population. That's my commitment.
Thank you for staying with us for the Tobago House of Assembly's Post-Executive Council Media Briefing for the week ending December 23rd, 2017.